Hi everybody, welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan. I am joined by the author of Loki and Sigyn, Lea Svendsen. Did I pronounce it correctly? Because my brain told me I didn't. I hope I did.
Yeah, you got it. It's a tricky, Norwegians have to be all like tricky with the D and the
Yeah,
E and all that.
they just spell it how it's supposed to sound. That's the easiest way to do it.
It looks prettier than the Swedish way. I
To
enrage
be
all your Swedish
fair,
listeners.
I butcher everybody's names, so I'm just terrible at pronouncing people's names. So just welcome to the
That's
club of mispronunciations.
I was gonna say I don't even pronounce my name correctly because my grandfather forgot how to speak Norwegian when he moved to America. So I always joke about, buddy, sure. I think you just slur it all together.
Okay, all right, rock on. Well, you wrote a absolutely gorgeous book that as soon as I saw Llewellyn announce it, I was like, I have to own a copy. I don't care if it's a press copy. I don't care if it's a additional full pretty copy. I want a copy. And so, of
Aw.
course, our contact Llewellyn was like, here's both. You can have both. I'm like, okay, thank you. And I read the press copy first, and then when I got the original copy, I had to read it again because it was so good. And it was just an absolutely beautiful and actually hilarious book. Like the first chapters, or the first chapter of just going through the myths, I was cackling and laughing, and I'm like, the author is a smartass because she interjected smartassery into what the gods would have said, and I love it because that's how I feel the gods would have done. It's perfection.
Thank you so much for saying that because my editors, I felt so bad for them when they got the first copy of the book. I'm like, I need to send them apology scotch and fruit baskets and stuff because this book is a mess. It's a book about Loki. You can't be straight with it. You gotta be all over the place. And my editorial notes when they came back were like, cut the snark and back talk. This is too much. And like the first page was full of instances where I needed to cut the quote unquote back talk. And then finally, like on the second page, there was a line note that said, here it is again. I'm not going to mention it again. I think you get the point. So my response, of course, was to, in the introduction, I added that note about, much to their chagrin, this is how the book is. And to be fair, you're writing about Loki. You cannot like just be serious and sober and academic when you're talking. Like even the academics have trouble writing about Loki in a
Right.
serious tone. I'm like, if we're talking about somebody who put on the spot tied his balls to a goat's beard, like
Yes.
you cannot be serious with this dude, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So I'm amazed that Llewellyn went with it and published it as is.
I'm
So thanks
so
everyone at
glad they
Llewellyn.
did. Oh, and that made it so much more enjoyable than just an academic text about Loki. Because if you try to take all of that away from Loki, Loki does become a little bit boring. And Loki is not boring. He's anything but boring. And so it made it so enjoyable to read. Our listeners out there, if you have not picked up a copy of this book already, I'm going to encourage you several times throughout this episode, as I often do with our interview guests because they're all amazing. Go buy a copy right now. Pause the recording and go and buy a copy. I promise you will not regret it.
Thank you. And also further introduction on the please buy. One of the things I'm doing, because this book is a gift, not only to Loki and Sigyn, but to the community, I am donating like 20 to 25% of all royalties and earnings I get from this back into the community. Donations to local charities like in my community and also to the wider heathen groups. And I'm going to be donating places that have significance to what you read about in the book. Like I'm going to be donating to women's and children's shelters, of course, in honor of Sigyn and Norwegian Valley. And I'm going to be donating to food banks because when you read the book, you'll learn that sometimes some of us refer to Loki as the scarfer of other people's foods.
Yes.
That's kind of a nod to that. Donating to LGBT community defense funds and support funds and diversity funds. So I appreciate all the support that I'm getting from folks so far because it's helping me to amass a very nice donation back to the community who needs it.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is if you are somebody that doesn't like to collect books or doesn't want to own it, you can buy a copy, read it, and then donate it to your local library. That is a really
Yeah.
great way for, I know people who live in smaller apartments and they just don't have the space to keep the books and they don't want the
Mhm.
digital copy. Go to
Yeah.
note it to donate it to your local library. Trust me, they will thank you for it. And they don't care if they have 20 copies because the more copies, that means there's more copies that go out to different readers. So
Mhm.
please donate to your local libraries as well.
Yes, this big time this, and share it with your friends and whatnot. Because
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. So, talking a little bit about your background, I loved how reading in your background, you grew up in the opposite of most Americans, where we all grew up knowing about Christianity. And when you came to America, or you grew up in America, you understood that you were like, well, no, I grew up heathen and Norse
yeah.
pagan, and I don't know much about Christianity. Someone teach me. And you learned
Yep.
it backwards, which was really interesting to see that perspective. So, if you want to tell us a little bit about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I am second generation Norwegian, and my grandfather was a very proud pagan. And I know at least one of his brothers was also a very proud pagan because his wife and daughters have told me, and they were very excited when they heard about me writing this book and whatnot. They're like, oh, Canute would have loved this. This would have been he would have been so proud of this. My grandfather was a very quiet man. And I always point out, and I'm very careful when I tell people that, yeah, I'm a third generation heathen, at least third generation, because I don't want to make people think that they have to be on guard around me or anything, like, oh,
Hmm.
I know better. No, that is absolutely not the case. My heathenry is very different from my father's heathenry, which was very different from my grandfather's heathenry. That's the really cool thing about heathenry is that it evolves
Hmm.
constantly and it's a very personal thing. Like my grandfather did not have other heathens. I mean, he actually, one of our favorite family lore stories, my mom loves the story and cackles every time she gets the chance to tell it, was in the 50s when my father was born, my grandfather started having kids. That was the time of like McCarthyism and anti-communism. And so you had to be like that good Christian family. And my grandfather fought with his mom, my great grandmother, when his kids were born because she wanted them to be baptized just so that other people wouldn't freak out. Like she didn't care about Christianity or anything. She just wanted to make sure that the family was safe and had good social standing. And
Hmm.
she like screamed at him, people are going to think we're heathens. And my grandfather screamed back, but Mom, we are heathens. So like he was very quiet and whatnot, but and my father's heathenry was of a different nature, and it's how I grew up. He's career military in the
Hmm.
army, so I grew up overseas in West Germany in the 80s. Excuse me, and didn't have a lot of interaction with any other faiths.
Hmm.
And it's really funny to think back on because, of course, we traveled all over Europe and we went to a lot of churches and whatnot, and a lot of religious sites and things. Like I knew all about Judaism because of where we lived and
Hmm.
because in the 80s it was still like the war was still recent memory. So we went to a lot of concentration camps and memorials and whatnot to honor victims of the Holocaust.
Right.
I learned about Judaism, but I didn't somehow like just did not know about Christianity. My father hated Christianity. And growing up, I thought that Jesus Christ was a swear word because my parents said it when they were angry. But if I said it when I was angry, I got in trouble. So imagine my first day at Catholic school after my mom and I had left my father and we came back to the States. My
Hmm.
mom enrolled in Catholic school because where we lived, the public school system was pretty broken.
Right.
So she wanted me to have the better educational opportunities. And also, she had that understanding that I need to learn about Christianity just because so much of American society is based on it and influenced by it. And I needed
Hmm.
to understand other people. But she didn't give me a crash course or anything on what to expect. She was more excited about the jumpers and the saddle shoes and stuff. So she like sends me off on my first day. I'm 10 years old, sitting there looking at a very graphic crucifix because the Catholics do like their detail.
Oh, yes.
And I'm just like, this is interesting. Like, it didn't scare me because I'd grown up around a lot of like medieval, like we, as a child, we went to old castles and dungeons and torture museums when I was growing up. We didn't do Disney. So I wasn't like scared by it, but I was like, this is just an interesting thing to see, with a bunch of school kids. And then the principal comes over on the intercom to start the morning prayers. And she says, "We thank you, Jesus Christ, for this beautiful day," as she did every morning. And I was like, oh my God, like, where am I? Why is the principal cursing? What is happening? So I got my crash course in Christianity in the Monsignor's office that morning. And then
Nice.
I just kind of rolled with it. I'm like, all right, let's see what this is about. And by the time I was 13, I was, that's when a lot of people get really rebellious from family upbringing and whatnot. And I'm like, ooh, best way to piss my father off is to become Christian. And so that was all like, my rebellion stage was just clearly out of control. I wanted to be Catholic. So I converted. I was like, whatever. It's like 13 is when everybody else in the school is getting confirmed. And I'm like, well, I have to learn all this stuff anyway. I might as well have my chance to recite it in front of the bishop. And also I was like really tired of every week at mass, everybody climbing over me to go up for a snack. And I'm just sitting there like an idiot, singled out and alone with no cookie. And I'm just like, I want in on that snack time, especially because, hey, they're telling me transubstantiation means that they're actually eating the body and blood. So let me in on that. Yes. And unfortunately, it wasn't quite all it was cracked up to be. So
I found it hilarious reading about it in the book. And the funny thing is, like, I'm sitting there reading this and I'm just like, what a world to grow up in. I was like almost jealous of the fact that you got to grow up that way, because I was raised Christian and I was raised Southern Baptist, not Catholic.
Good name.
But it was definitely one of those things where I'm like, huh, I don't know how this looks like from the other side of the fence. This is very interesting. Okay. I didn't know people weren't raised, like didn't start. I mean, I knew that it was like over here in America, like you're either Christian or you start out like Catholic or you start out atheist. There's not really any other options. Yeah. So it was very strange, but it was so funny to read about it. And I'm so glad that you got to share your story with us, but oh gosh, like it was a wonderful experience to see the other side of the fence through your eyes. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I'm glad my trauma was amusing.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like everybody's trauma at one point in time is amusing to everyone. So
oh, absolutely. If you don't have a sense of humor about it, then
yes,
you're gonna be in that spot.
and that's the one thing that Loki, being a practitioner of Loki, has actually taught me, is that it's like you can laugh at your own trauma. It's okay. Yep. It's totally, if you don't laugh, you're going to cry, and that's not okay. Don't cry. Laugh. Laugh is good. Look, I did this thing. I tied my balls to a goat, and you can laugh at it. It's fine. I did it to make someone else laugh, so it's cool. It was agonizing, but it's cool. Laugh at it, please. Which is wonderful. So you mentioned in your bio that you are a devotee of Loki, but a priestess of Sigyn. Would you like to talk about the differences between that? Like why devotee, why priestess, and all of that? And if you don't want to talk about that, that's totally okay. I may be putting you on the spot here, which is fine.
No worries. I'm one of those people, I can overshare so easily. Like I'm very like blunt, open book. Fair. I will tell you things you don't want to know. Ask my coworkers about my I used to be a mortician, so like whenever like a coworker like makes a comment, I'm like, hey, fun fact, I know from being a mortician. They're just like, oh my God, no. No, I don't want to hear any stories. No, I don't want to hear about this or how that's done. So yeah, so that's kind of a failing of mine, is that I have no concept of subtlety or keeping my mouth shut.
Perfect. I love it. I love it so much.
So so the devotee of Loki versus being a priestess, that's actually something, it's kind of funny because that's something that came from my experience, my brief short-lived experience with being Catholic, because when I was 14 and I started high school, the Catholic high school, there were actually nuns that taught. They weren't just like admin or around like they had been in my junior high school. And I was really enamored with Sister Helene, in my honors theology classes, she was a member of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And I really dug like the idea of being a nun, being able to devote your life to service and to prayer and to devotion to God. And also the whole, not having to worry about what to wear or where you're going to live was a really cool concept too. That like was very military to me. Having grown up in the military and going to Catholic school, like I'm very pro uniforms. I don't like thinking about clothes and having to buy clothes. Just tell me what to wear. I'm cool with that, whatever. So I was like, so then I want to be a nun. And then we had a retreat to one of the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary convents, and sold. I'm like, yes, this is going to be it. Even though once I had converted to Catholicism, I felt like I was in a vacuum, like all of a sudden. Growing up, I'd always been very aware of the different energies and presences that kind of like, float in and out throughout, the day and throughout your life.
Right.
And once I converted to Catholicism, it was like suddenly I was in a vacuum. Like there was just nothing anymore. And I would pray, and I tried really hard to be devout, but it was like talking to a brick wall. It was always very. So I was like, oh, well, I'll be a nun. I'll prove my worth or whatever. And obviously that did not happen. By the time I graduated high school, I was like, well, this clearly isn't working out. And I kind of finally did get a response to a prayer, like when I was like 17. Like it was this impression of Jesus just saying, I appreciate the efforts, but you're not mine. Others have already claimed you. So that was kind of my kicking off point to going back to the beliefs that I knew. Before that, I had kind of like did a cursory glance into what other options, like religions and stuff there were, but I was like, no, this is ridiculous. Why don't I just go back to what I know? And once I did, like suddenly like the energies were back and I was quote unquote plugged in again, like I had been growing up. But the want to be a nun never really left me. And a few years ago, I had a pretty intense experience at what was then called East Coast Thing, following a 3-hour-long float that I had to Loki with a really good friend of mine. And Loki finally broke through and was like, listen, I heard you. Here's the deal. I can help you with this thing here, just bind yourself to me. And so I made my oaths binding, and like after several weeks, because I wasn't like, okay. And it took a lot of discernment and reflection and talking with other people. Be like, am I losing my mind? Am I crazy? What the fuck is this? I'm sorry about language. I don't know if you
nope, you can cuss, totally fine.
Fucking A. Okay. And the nature of the oaths is similar to like what it would be. That's why I joke and call myself a Lokean nun, because I'm wholly devoted to him. Everything I do is for him. He's in everything I do. And it's very, it's more of an internal thing. It's funny because it's very much external, because like I said, his energy is in everything I do. And he's always on my mind when I'm doing things that, like, impact the community and other people. But it's still very much a personal thing. Whereas with Sigyn, the Northeast Heathen Community, which is the regional group I'm a part of, didn't really mention her, didn't really talk about her. She was kind of ignored and forgotten because of the Loki bans that had been going on for decades. So I started bringing her back into the community consciousness, and that to me feels more like clergy work, like priesthood, because it's more of an external thing. It's more bringing a god or a goddess back into the vernacular and helping people learn how to honor them or how to develop a relationship with them, and to lead floats and rituals in honor of them that people can attend. Well, I don't really do that for Loki. Again, his deal and I is more of a personal thing. But for Sigyn, I'm very getting her back into community consciousness and getting people talking about her again and thinking about the value and the worth that she has and the lessons that she has for community. So I'm a little more pumped about that.
Well, I think that's absolutely wonderful. And the cool thing that I was super excited about when I saw your book coming out, because there's some text out there that's devoted to Loki, but some of it's really biased towards, fascist stuff, and then some of it's not. And then there's some of it that you're like, that's a little questionable. I'm not sure what I just read. Okay. And then there's some of it that's really good. But there's hardly anything. I think I have read maybe one article about Sigyn, and that's it. And there hardly is anything at all. And so I was like, yes, finally, she's getting a proper book. Yes. So, and
like she's been in the game for too long.
Yeah,
bring her back.
She has been very much out of the game. And you mentioned this also in your book about how there's really not a whole lot of historical lore about her, that she was kind of wiped away from the lore. And so the little bit that's left is very, very minute compared to everybody else. And so it's really nice to kind of see you bringing her back into the circle. And I do think that probably going forward, as far as modern day paganism and modern day Norse paganism and heathenry looks like, I think that when it comes to her, we're probably going to have to forge a new path with her, because the old lore has been kind of lost, which is really disturbing and sad.
Yes. Yeah, and it's remarkable too, because she's depicted on the Gosford Cross, which is one of like the big archaeological, things representing Norse mythology. It has a lot of stuff on it as well, but she's one of the very few goddesses that we actually have a visual representation from, Middle Ages, like from that kind of crossover.
Yes.
She was important enough to be represented on this cross alongside Christian mythology. So I think it's very fascinating that she has such a crucial role, and Loki clearly has such a vitally important role through all the lore, and they appear on the Gosford Cross, but there's like just people don't really either talk about her or they shun her because of her associations with Loki.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you mentioned when you were, wanting to devote yourself to being a nun and all that, and, you had that experience with Jesus. My experiences with Jesus have always been very slim, kind of like yours. Like, yeah, I'm here, but we're not really supposed to work together. We can be friends, but we're not really supposed to work together. And growing up Christian, when you get that message, that is a disturbing message.
I can imagine.
It's very disturbing. And I was already having like a crisis of faith when this was happening to begin with. And like, I'm very much pro working with Jesus, but I'm not okay with the aspects of modern Christianity. Well, actually most historical Christianity as well.
Yeah.
But as far as the Christian church goes, the church itself, I'm not very much okay with, but I'm very much pro Jesus. So if you want to work with Jesus, and I tell everybody on my show all the time, if you want to work with Jesus, by all means, please work with Jesus. I think Jesus is a great deity.
Oh, he is a cool dude. And I love what he teaches. It's the humanity factor that is kind of worked it up.
Yes. And interestingly enough, on our sister show, Chaos and Shadow, we do a thing called Seance Saturday. And seance is a very loose term. It's just mostly like spiritual Saturdays where we go and communicate with whatever wants to come through. And at one point in time, we worked with John E.L. Tenney, and he came and brought this wonderful board that had Jesus on it. But he called him Space Jesus because Jesus was apparently from Mars. And that's who came through and talked to us. The funniest thing about it was Space Jesus got all the biblical lore about Jesus correct. Like everything that Jesus came through the Bible and said and wanted to teach, he was like, yeah, that was me. That was totally me. But so cool. We asked him, we're like, how do you feel about the church? And he goes, yeah, they screwed it all up. They've screwed everything up. It's wrong. I hate it. Don't listen. Please stop. Stop what you are doing and revert back to my teachings. So it was a very interesting experience. And ever since then, I've never really been a true devotee or true follower of Jesus. But I do hold a place for space Jesus on my altar because I'm like, I like your teachings. I like them for humanity. You can have a little bit of space right here on my altar. Just this little bit. This corner is yours. It's fine. Because I feel like space Jesus is the one that needs to be taught to everyone because his teachings were on that.
So, and I kind of want to get like a My Buddy Christ figure and like put a little helmet on him.
I love it. I love it so much.
That's so cool. Oh my God. Yes. All hail space Jesus.
All hail space Jesus. And the funny thing is, I really do think that space Jesus and Loki would hang out with each other. Like, I totally think that they would be, like, without a doubt, just vibing together. Like, if the gods had, like, a bonfire party, Loki and Space Jesus would be sitting there drinking a beer or wine or whatever, and kicking back and having a grand old time just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh my God. Yes. You are dead on with that.
So, one kind of heavier topic I'd like you to kind of touch on today is, what are your thoughts, especially, you mentioned it briefly in your book, especially going through the history of heathenry, especially in America, of what modern heathens can do to break away from their fascist ties?
Yeah, that's a good one. And actually, the funny thing is, I'm plotting a second book of a all father, not some father vibe.
I love
that
it.
Goes deeper into the history about fascism and Norse heathenry and how to combat it. I haven't really done much on that yet because I'm still trying to keep my head afloat with everything else.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
I'm kind of in that like self-care zone right now.
Yes.
But no, like that is my goal, is to write a book examining that. And my personal way of doing it, again, this is like, whenever I talk about heathenry and how to practice, I'm always talking about my own experience. I'm not saying this is what you have to do, because not everybody's in the same situation as me. Like, for instance, I live in a very liberal area where I have always been openly heathen, obnoxiously so sometimes. Like at one of the funeral homes I used to work at was owned by a Mennonite. And yeah, I would like walk up and down the halls like when it was empty with like, because I have one of those travel mugs shaped like a drinking horn. And I would have my coffee with that, and I'd be, hail the day, hail the fall. And he'd be like, oh my God, go back and clean the prep room or something. He didn't care that I was heathen. He was just like, what the hell are you doing?
You're going to scare the people. Please stop.
Fun fact, the clergy and the priests freaking loved me. They would like corner me during viewings and stuff and chat with me.
Oh, I love that.
Never in like a like proselytizing way. They were just like so fascinated by everything. So yeah, so I have that privilege where I can be openly, obnoxiously heathen everywhere I am and not face repercussions. And I know that like a lot of people can't, like I know that there's some regions of the country or some professions where people are uncomfortable being anything other than white Anglo-Saxon Protestant type thing, because it can be dangerous for them. It can be very bad for their careers. They can be shut out. So when I talk about things that, like, initially I'll talk about like, well, what I do. And it's cool if you're able to do that or if you're comfortable doing that, but obviously it's not going to work, and you shouldn't feel bad if you're not able to be like on the front lines type of thing. Because there are other ways, as I sound like suddenly very sly and coy, because I'm so in my day-to-day life, especially back when I was in public facing roles like a funeral director, and after my body decided to start shutting down and being like, nope, you're not doing this anymore. I was like working as like receptionist, cashier type thing, and now I'm at an internal role, so I can't do this as much anymore, but whenever I'm in public I still try to do. I always have a Mjolnir pendant, a Thor's hammer pendant on very much on display. I will wear other jewelry that has Norse themes, it has runes on it, has like designs and whatnot. And I wear a head veil. I cover because of it's that kind of nod to being a nun, and also because Sigyn had told me at one point, it doesn't hurt to have something protecting your head from the venom dripping above. So I cover when I'm in public as well. So all these things combined will make me stand out a little bit and sparks conversation. People will ask me why I wear the veil, or they'll ask me what that necklace is. And I do that so that I can present a friendly, inclusive, safe space representation of heathens. Because I also live in I live in a city, so it's super culturally diverse. And in my public facing roles, and even if I'm just out like running to the gas station or something, like I try to be super friendly, super, chill, nice, helpful and whatnot. So that way in the future, when people see a Mjolnir or runes or something, they'll associate it with somebody who is, kind and good and helpful to everybody around them, regardless of what they look like or what language they're speaking and all that. That was a big thing of mine back the other year. Well, anytime there's like news about white nationalists or white supremacists or neo-Nazis doing something or another, there's going to be at least one picture of somebody wearing a giant Mjolnir or with a Valknut tattooed on them somewhere prominent. And people will always associate them. They're like, oh, well, those are the symbols of hate. No, they're absolutely not symbols of hate. They've been co-opted by hateful people.
Yes.
But that doesn't make them symbols of hate. So I try to be very upfront and obvious about wearing these symbols when I'm out and about and interacting with people in my community. Because I want them to know that, hey, we're not all like that. It can be a good thing, and let me tell you why it's a good thing. And these are the things to watch out for if somebody is being an absolute shithead and causing problems. Because guess what? Every religion has that. Unfortunately, with heathenry being a minority group, the only time the news mentions it is when the white supremacist assholes do something horrible.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And I remember when, after the insurrection, the Capitol riot, I had heard like some news rumor, and at this point I can't remember if it was true or not, about the FBI adding Thor's hammer to their list of known hate symbols. And I flipped out on that because my father is actually buried in a national cemetery. Like I said, he was career Army, and he has Mjolnir on his government-issued headstone. And I remember, because when I was still a funeral director, that was when the Department of Defense had finally okayed the use of pentacles and Mjolnir for pagan members of the military. And I was all excited. I'm like, oh, this is great. That I wonder when I'll get to see my first headstone with Mjolnir on it. And it turns out the first time I saw a government, military headstone with Mjolnir on it was the one that my paternal cousin had sent me from my father's grave down in Georgia. And I was like, holy shit, that looks amazing. So yeah, I lost my mind when people started saying like, oh yeah, the FBI is adding Mjolnir, Thor's hammer to the list of known hate symbols. Because I'm like, that is a government, like it's a federally recognized religion and a federally recognized symbol. What are they going to do to my father's headstone if they decide that this is suddenly a hateful thing? Like you can't do that to the heathens who already have that headstone. That's religious discrimination.
Absolutely.
We have to do better. Unfortunately, we have the onus to be better and do better and be visible in our communities to counteract what these assholes are doing in their little enclaves and their toxicity.
Yes, absolutely. And kind of, talking a little bit about that and the taking responsibility aspect of that is something that I kind of want to segue into what it's like working with Loki and why Loki is not the devil of Norse paganism. So tell us a little bit about what's a day in the life of working with Loki, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
It's funny because my devotions and interactions with Loki are very, it's just like so ingrained into my daily
Mhm.
existence that I'm constantly, making my offerings and devotions and things to him, and people won't even notice. Like last year, my partner in crime and chaos moved in with me, and he said he wanted to make sure that he didn't interfere with, with what I've got going on for
Mhm.
devotions to Loki. And he'd said this like a couple months after he moved in. I'm like, oh no, it hasn't impacted anything. I'm like, I do it all the time. You just don't notice because it's just kind of, it's very much a mindfulness thing. And again, the energy, like the things that I read and things that I'm doing tries to be like, give him a taste of the human experience.
Right.
And also, when I interact with other people, especially, and this ties in with what I was just saying about trying to put a good reputation about Thor's hammer and
Mhm.
about healing into the community. It's always been very important to me to make people feel comfortable and safe around me,
Right.
which is a funny thing to say because I'm like 5'3", like, and I'm like a bundle of defective genes. Like I'm at the age where I'm losing an organ a year, all that stuff.
Oh, jeez.
So I'm like, oh, I'm so intimidating. But no, I want people to know that, safe, I hold safe space for everyone.
Mhm.
And so that's very much part of my devotions to to Loki and to Sigyn
Mhm.
is the passion and the kindness and putting people at ease and trying to make them laugh and smile. Like you had said earlier, even um, that gift of laughter, of
Mhm.
survival. 'Cause as a funeral director, it's funny because I went into to mortuary work because I wanted to be an embalmer, like just
Right.
purely an embalmer. I'm like, I don't really want to interact with people. But where I live, it's a dual license. So every funeral home is going to have you doing both meeting the families, running the funerals, as well as the embalming work. So I kind of got thrown into that regardless, which is fine because I ended up really loving working with the families.
Mhm.
Um, Even for the really traumatic cases, the really sudden, unexpected, where like people would literally, when they come to the funeral home for the first time to make arrangements, that seems to be when it becomes real to
Yeah.
them. So a lot of times I would go to the front door to greet a family to come in for the arrangement conference, and like the mother would like sink to her knees just like sobbing hysterically, and her husband and sons would have to carry her in and whatnot.
Mhm.
um and I would do whatever it took to put them at ease, and I gave, at first gave them plenty of space, and I was very quiet to let them kind of process what they needed to do, and I would step away for a little bit so they could collect themselves.
Mhm.
And then when you go in to do the arrangements, a lot of it is basically data collection because you need to know a lot of demographic information for death certificates and for permits and information for the obituary and whatnot.
Right.
That can very easily turn into like an order taking kind of thing
Mhm.
because you're just like going down this list. All right, one highest level education. All right, and what was their occupation for the so when I was doing that, I would try to get conversation, get the family talking about their loved one.
Mhm.
Like, oh, oh, they worked in this sector. Oh, that's really interesting. That must have been something. And what are some things that would tell you about like their favorite, if they were a teacher or something? What was their favorite thing to do for their students, or what was their favorite topic to teach and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Something as simple and like stupid as saying that would kind of be that gateway for the family to be like, oh, okay, so you recognize that the person we're talking about was an actual human being who mattered.
Mhm.
Awesome. We want to tell you all about them.
Right.
So they would start telling stories. And when they start telling stories, of course, then somebody would be like, hey, you remember that time when? And then everybody would start laughing and they'd start like pulling out their phones to show me pictures of them. And they just go on and on and on. And like they would start laughing. And then once we got to that point, I would kind of start getting a little cheeky myself
Mhm.
and make jokes about, funeral related stuff. Like, which sounds like awful to say, like, oh my God, the funeral director is like joking about services. But no, I would try to be like, listen, this isn't a scary thing. This is a
Mhm.
very, very normal thing. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to like scam you out of money or anything like that. Like, let me like for the kind of things I would joke about, just offer some perspective on that, because I just realized what an awful thing that is to say. We'd go into the selection room and looking at caskets and stuff, and of course people freeze up and be like, oh god, I don't know what's the difference between this casket or that casket, because with metal caskets you can get a sealing casket or a non-sealing casket. Well, what's the difference? What would you get? And I'd say, well, if I honestly, to be perfectly frank with you, I would go with the sealing casket because I'm a terrible arachnophobe. I don't like the idea of spiders getting in there. So, like, if you guys if you were cool with that, then awesome. Otherwise,
and then I never thought about that. Now I have a whole new fear. Thanks.
Get a sealing casket, you'll be fine. Then I take it a step further, be like, that's actually one of the reasons why I want to be cremated, because yes, I know I'm dead. I know I won't know. But still, just the idea of like having a spider crawl on me horrifies me to the point where I'm like, burn me up.
Yeah.
I don't want there anything a spider can crawl on.
Or just that, Hollywood image of like the spider crawling out of the eye socket. No, thank you. Nope. I'm good.
Nope.
I do not need to know that about my corpse.
I actually had this irrational fear. Thankfully, this never happened, but I was convinced it was going to happen at some point when doing a house call, like where somebody's at home, and we go to the house to bring them into our care. I was convinced that like sometime I was going to walk in there where they're going to be like terrariums in the living room, and one of the lids were going to be slightly askew, and the family was going to be like, oh yeah, they had tarantulas, but one of them is missing.
Oh god.
And I was just like, you're going to have to call another funeral home at this point. I am sorry. Like, wish I could help you, but I do not want to get like back to the funeral home and then have a tarantula jump out at me. So, clearly I've always been very professional in everything.
Yes.
But that's like how I would just relate to people and relate to the families and get them comfortable and let them realize that I actually did care. And that would make them feel comfortable, and then they could start laughing. And if they laughed, if they smiled, then I knew they were going to get through it. And that to me has always been Loki's gift. Circling back to the story of Scotty and the goat. I mean, because he made her smile, because he made her laugh, he saved the hides of everybody else in Asgard. Because once you have that smile, once you crack through that hurt, and you get that smile, that little tug at the edge of the lips, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're going to pass through it. You can make amends to what you need to make amends for, which is hugely important because Loki is a god of accountability.
Yes.
When you read, yes, he does like a lot of shitty stuff. I'm not going to lie. Hypercritical of like reading that first chapter through the mythology. You would never know I actually like the dude because I'm
pointing out all of his faults.
Like, yeah, I'm like, you're a fucking creep, dude. Like, knock it off. But but he's always taken accountability, and he's done what needs to be done to rectify the situation. And that's something else that I incorporate hugely into my life and always have. Like, integrity is everything to me. That as a funeral director, it was vital. Because people already have like a negative association towards funeral directors a lot of the time. I mean, have the reputation of being like, oh, prey on the grieving people and rob them of all their money. No, absolutely not. Like, we're here to help you.
Right.
We're here because we care about the pain you're going through, and we're going to help you through this. At least the funeral homes that I worked at, that was the mindset, which I appreciated so very much. And so, yeah, transparency and accountability and integrity are vital to everything I've ever done. And that's how I carry myself throughout my life. I joke about like, oh, and I'm too lazy to lie. I don't want to have to keep track of who like what I said to who and this, that, and the other thing. And the anxiety of being found out, like, oh my God, horrifying. Like, I'm too lazy for that. Just like I'm too lazy to be like an asshole to people. That takes effort.
It does. It takes effort. It takes so much effort. And the people that, are out there being assholes 24/7,
Mhm.
You have some serious stamina because I couldn't do it. I
I
couldn't do it.
know.
I am more of one of those people. I'm like, oh, you're gonna be shitty to me? Well, thanks for
Mhm.
letting me know. We're not friends
Yep.
anymore. Peace out.
Yep.
I'm gonna go live my life over here. You don't exist anymore. Bye
Oh my God. Yeah, same.
bye. You know, having a chronic illness, having what neurospicy neurodivergence, and all those wonderful things, it makes life so much more complicated. And by the time you add in,
Yes.
having somebody else be like, "Oh, I have to be mean to you." Oh,
Yeah.
really? Can we
Yeah.
just not? Can I just go away now?
Can't we just exist? Like, come on. Come on.
Angry scowl. Here you are. There. That's all you get. I'm done. Bye. Yeah, like literally, I don't have time for the drama, and I don't want to deal with the drama, which is so funny being a practitioner of Loki, because Loki caused a lot of drama. And you're like, and when you tell somebody, hey, I'm a practitioner of Loki, and they're like, really? So you enjoy all the chaos? And I'm like, for the record, I live in chaos. I have multiple sclerosis. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to
Yeah.
wake up tomorrow and walk. So
Yeah.
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 Um that's one of the reasons why Loki's in my life, is he's like, you get to laugh through
Yep.
the chaos because you don't know what
Mhm.
tomorrow's gonna look like. So wake up and smile. I know you don't feel
Yep.
like it, but do it anyway.
Yep. Yeah, and that chaos, like chaos has such a negative connotation too in the
Yes.
community. Like people are afraid of it, and I'm like, yeah, it does have its downsides but the thing is, like humans just have this need for complacency, I guess.
Yes.
Like you just want to settle into like boring routine. Even people as lazy as me, and I'm sure like you're in this mindset too, where it's
Mm-hmm.
just like just let me have a boring existence. I don't want to deal with this, that, or the other thing. Um, just let me make it through my day and enjoy the experiences I can have, and so be it.
Yep.
Um, but complacency is, and I mentioned this in the book, and I've mentioned it on my blog, that's super dangerous because that's when you stop growing. That's when you
Mm-hmm.
stop challenging yourself. Um, and Loki will bring in something to shake you up. Like chaos being whether it's like a job change or moving somewhere else or family dynamics shifting. It just it's something that just disrupts your routine so
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of snap back to reality and you're like, oh, okay, hey, so cool, there's options and I have things that I can do differently and I can learn about this and grow and be a better person for doing this and be more helpful to others by doing this. Like I don't think it's all doom and action and drama the way a lot of people seem to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's the key
Yes.
thing.
Absolutely. And the fun thing about doing that, and now I wasn't actually a practitioner of Sigyn for a very long time. And mainly because truthfully, I forgot she existed.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until probably about a year and a half ago that I was just like, "Oh yeah, you're married. I'm sorry. Wow, please don't hate me, Loki. I am sorry." And
Oh,
he's like, "No, it's cool. It's cool. Here she is. You should
yeah.
talk to her. You would like her. She's nice. She doesn't bite, I promise." And once I kind of started working with her, I was like, "Wow, I didn't realize how much I needed her balance to your
Mhm.
chaos." And once you
Yes.
bring the two of them in, it's like you see all the chaos that happens around you, but then you start to see the positive in it
Mhm.
versus oh crap, my life has gone to shit. What happened?
Yeah.
And Loki's like, I tweaked a knob. I'm sorry. And Sigyn's like, don't worry. I got you. It's cool. It's gonna be fine.
Mhm.
Everything's gonna work out exactly. Don't panic. She is
Yep.
the don't panic button to his
She is.
panic button. It's wonderful. And the best part about working with the two of them is when you start to see that, especially the way I explain people when they're like, how do you work with chaos and how do you work that into your magic and how do you work that into just working with him? Like, how do you do it without losing your marbles? And I say, how do you walk out in the middle of a rainstorm?
Yes.
And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you walk out in the middle of the rainstorm. Yeah, the water's not going to hurt you. You're going to get a little wet. it's going to be slightly uncomfortable, possibly. You might have some wind, so it's going to be a little bit difficult. So you have to have an umbrella or a raincoat or something, and you have to figure out how to manage the chaos of that storm. But the storm will end. And when it ends and it comes back, the sun is shining, the plants are growing, everything is working the way that it's supposed to. And sometimes you end up with things that are really dangerous, like tornadoes, floods, those kind of things. But it's not because there's too much chaos in that storm. It's because something's out of balance and it has to be reset.
Oh my God, that is the perfect analogy.
Yes. So working with Loki is kind of that way. And interestingly enough, I also work with Thor, which Thor and Loki don't really see eye to eye all the time, but they tolerate each other in my practice, which is really nice. And the funny thing is, when we have really like bad tornadic weather down here in Tennessee, I will be like, Thor, calm your shit, please. Calm down, put it at ease, make it skip my house. It's not coming here. Calm down, please. Protect me in the storm, please. And then Loki's just like, it'll be fine. Power goes out. Loki, stop. I love you, but stop. And then a few minutes later, the power comes back on. It's like, kidding. I'm kidding. I didn't mean to cause you stress. I'm sorry. That is essentially what it's like working with them in my Norse household, which is so funny because when I first started working with Loki, my husband was a devout worker of Thor, and there was a lot of this tense energy at the beginning in my house, and I'm like, guys, you have to live together. You have to work together. Stop it. So it was very funny kind of seeing those kind of things. Yeah, literally, it was like having two cats with a spray bottle. They're like, hiss, hiss. And I'm like, guys, I will grab a bucket of water and just dump it on the both of you. Forget the squirt bottle. Stop it. But that is definitely what it's like working with the two of them. And it's very fun. Now, we have a little bit of time left on the show, but we're gonna have to have you back on the show because this has been an absolute delight because I'm having so much fun chatting. But tell everybody a little bit about the book, where they can find it. You've already told them, you know, about your charities and all that stuff. Tell us about where they can find you on social media, how we can connect with you, yada yada yada, all the good stuff.
Yeah, the social media part I'm just cracking up because I haven't even been on Facebook in like a month and a half. I'm so bad at social media. I'm just so lazy. No, the book is a devotional. It goes into the Loki and Sigyn and the lore, some of the historical stuff. There's a chapter about the history of heathenry in America. It's mostly about the history with the Northeast Heathen Community because this is where I live, practice, and the book was this book is a gift to the community too because so many people reached out to me and spoke with me and shared their stories and told me their experiences and whatnot, and that's all reflected in that chapter. There's contributions from people who remain anti-Loki, like they explain why they don't work with him and why they're not comfortable like in presence in places where he has been invoked or whatever, because it's important to have conversation about, you know, from both perspectives because like you mentioned, the balance is really crucial. And I just hope this book is something that opens up that conversation so that both sides have a better understanding of where each is coming from. So that way, when they meet in person, it's not a fight. It's more of a, hey, you know, what are your experiences? This is cool. Like, you know, how can we like work around this or something? It goes on into a little bit of a 101 crash course in Norse heathenry. Just so that way people could, this book is not just for heathens. It's for anybody who has an interest in Loki and Sigyn. But I have that crash course chapter in there because I'm always saying context matters. And for working with Loki and Sigyn, it is useful to understand the practices and beliefs of the people who like work with them within that heathen framework. And then there's information about like attributes and the lessons that they really impart to us in day to day, and a couple of rituals that I've written and performed with people. And then Erica Wren, who is a longtime Lokean and has done a lot of work to repair the damage that other Lokeans had done to the Northeast Heathen Community over the years, to bring him back into the community. They have contributed a lot of information as well to the book, and wrote a section on Loka Brenna and provided some rituals as well. So every time I talk about this book, I can't not talk about how amazing this community is, and how grateful I am to everybody for chiming in and sharing their thoughts and sharing their experiences so that this book could happen. It can be found on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Llewellyn.com. You can order straight from the publisher there. It's also available on ebook forms, and also audiobook. They did release an audiobook version.
Oh, did they?
Happy. Yep.
I will have to get that as well, because I love having it on audiobook.
Yeah, I know that a lot of like neurodivergent people have a hard time focusing on printed words, so audiobooks are much better. So I'd asked about if that was a possibility, and they said, oh, well, we'll see what the marketing team does, and if the audiobook company that we work with will do it. And they did, and I'm super excited. And Leslie Howard narrates it, and she was wonderful. She's such a sweetheart. So I'm super thrilled that that option is also available for folks. And as far as the social media, my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are all under the handle Lokesrev, Lokesrev. It's Norwegian for Loki's facts. Again, I'm almost never on them because I feel like I'm working like three full-time jobs, and while also wrangling 2 cats and a ferret and a partner in crime and chaos. I
mean,
I don't update very often.
Definitely. I'm also one of the first people to admit that there are days where I don't even open Twitter and Facebook. What is Facebook? I haven't looked at Facebook in like 6 months, so don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. Do your best, and that's all we can hope for, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and same with my blog, A Loki Kinda Life. I'm like, I keep bitching to my partner. I'm like, oh my God, I need to write. So I've got 7,000 half-finished drafts queued up, and my brain is always spinning with things to write about. And then like, I get home from my 9 to 5 and I'm so just exhausted. And I'm like, I'm going to lie down for an hour. And then 4 hours later, Kevin's poking at me like, hey,
like, hey, okay? You should have dinner and go to bed.
Yep.
So, I love it so much.
I have planned for like my blog and things like that. So, maybe check in once a month and see if I posted anything.
That's fair. That's fair. You guys know that I will have all these great links in the show notes. Again, go buy a copy of Lea's book. You won't regret it. I promise. If you enjoyed our conversation and all the wonderful laughter and good times that we had today, you're going to love her book. I don't usually cackle when reading nonfiction witchcraft books, or like every now and then I'll get a smirk, maybe a little chuckle, but I was cackling with some of the stuff in this book, especially Freya's, oh, hell no. I love that. That like was one of my favorite moments. And I'm like, I can literally see her saying this and like throwing something at one of the, oh, it was perfect. I saw like the whole interaction in Asgard. It was great. It was beautifully written. Oh, Lea, thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, we're going to have you back on the show because this was an absolute blast. We'll have to come back, talk more about Loki, talk about your upcoming book whenever it gets out there and gets released and all that good stuff. But yes, this was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope
you so much for having me. Yes, I would love that. You are such a delight. Thank you.
Oh, yay. I love it. All right, guys. Again, go buy Lea's book. That's the last time I'm going to say it. Y'all stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other and hold yourselves accountable. Bye, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.